Darren Criss' role as a real-life mass murderer could not be further from the job that made him famous. And the assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story, the 9-part series about the murder of the fashion designer, which also stars Aja Ramirez as Versace, Penelope Cruz as his sister, Donatella Versace, and Ricky Martin as Versace's lover. Antonio D'Amico, the 31-year-old actor, singer and songwriter, portrays Andrew Cunanan, the man who became famous for killing fashion designer Gianni Versace in July 1997, after murdering at least 4 other people. It's a far cry from Blaine Anderson, the singing and dancing warbler character Criss played on Glee for 5 years. Aja Ramirez as Gianni Versace, FX. That said, the assassination of Gianni Versace and Glee have more in common than just Criss as a star, and that's how he got involved in the first place. Both series are executively produced by Ryan Murphy, who is also behind Nip Tuck, The New Normal and The American Horror Story. I think being part of a Ryan Murphy show is exciting, and a story that is so interesting like this, Criss told The Fix during his Sydney promo tour, ahead of the series launch in Australia. Darren Criss as Andrew Cunanan, FX. The show's title may have the name Gianni Versace in it. It was Cunanan's murder of Versace that made him an infamous figure, but the series' 9 episodes are really about Andrew Cunanan's story. We always talked about it being a character piece, and I liked that it was juxtaposed against Gianni's story, and this sort of create-a-destroy dichotomy that we're exploring throughout the whole show, Criss explains. Even though Aja, who played Gianni, even though we didn't necessarily have really any scenes together except for one, our stories were constantly on our minds when doing stuff that had nothing to do with each other. We had this scene that happens that may or may not have happened, we don't know. I don't think it's important. I think it's more about the ethos we discover about these 2 men. When Criss talks about being unsure about whether certain events happened, he's referring to the lack of material available about Cunanan. What most people know about Cunanan, and what a Google search will tell you, is that he was a troubled young man who went on a 3-month killing spree in mid-1997. After Versace's death, Cunanan found himself listed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. He was 27 when he died by suicide, 8 days after he killed Versace. DATA-REACTROOT equals data react DATA-REACT-CHECKSUM equals 511,986,914 data react react MT 4 react MT 5 react MT 6. Despite the lack of resources, Criss still had a few things to create his performance off of. When asked how he prepared for the role, he joked, "You know, I just did a lot of drugs, and I went crazy, man. Rock and roll." He apologized immediately after, "Sorry, you have the unfortunate position of being later in the day." There's sort of 3 different Andrew Cunanans to take into consideration, he went on to explain. You have the real person that walked and talked and roamed this earth, who I will never have access to. There is the Andrew Cunanan that is sort of Frankenstein together from Marie North's book, Vulgar Favors, Andrew Cunanan, Gianni Versace, and the largest failed manhunt in history which our show is based off of. And then there is this Andrew that is in the script that Tom Rob Smith has written, and this world that Ryan Murphy has curated, and that has to be my guiding light. I can only take so much from the other ones. At the end of the day, as an actor you have to service the script, so characterization and the other stuff you sort of have to piece together on your own from some of those other things you've heard. Criss admitted it was an advantage for him that people weren't super familiar with Cunanan in terms of how he spoke, how he walked, how he carried himself. We don't know, so that gives me carte blanche to kind of do not whatever I want, but it gives me a safety net to just focus on the emotional concept of him as opposed to the more literal characterization of him. Darren Criss as Andrew Cunanan, FX. And while Darren Criss obviously has very little in common with Cunanan, there is one unexpected thing they share, both of them are half-Filipino. Cunanan was born to a Filipino-American father and an Italian-American mother, Criss' mother is a native of Cebu and his father is of English, German and Irish descent. What are the chances that the producers could find someone who not only nailed the role performance-wise, but also ethnically? Especially given Hollywood's history with whitewashing roles. It's a difficult thing. My particular situation is so specific, Criss said of whitewashing. I mean, there's a huge serendipity in all of this, and this is very, very twisted. The fact that I'm playing a part of a person who has the same ethnicity as me, I'm really glad that that could work out. What I'm not glad is that it's for somebody that's famous for doing something truly horrible. If I was ever in a position to stop it, I would have liked to think I would have tried to do something about it. But I am representing my particular ethnic makeup as a result of something that was truly horrible. Penelope Cruz's Donatella vs. FX. Criss understands the impact that a story like Cunanan's could have on a lot of people who don't see themselves represented in pop culture, especially with the treatment it's been given. Somebody made the point that in episode 8, this was the first time on a television show with this scale that we were looking into the life of a Filipino family and a Filipino man, a complex character with so much weight and consideration to that experience, Criss said. This was the first time they were seeing this on TV, at least on popular television. I kind of took that for granted. You go, oh my god, that's true, maybe that's not something that would happen a lot. And to be a small part of that is really, really cool. Criss hopes that representation in pop culture continues to evolve, not only for ethnicity or whitewashing, but for women, and for all genders and sexualities.